Listen, I love a good bubble bath, but if a 20-minute soak was the answer to everything, we'd all be thriving, right? Welcome to Your Well Life, the podcast that goes way beyond self-care checklists and into the real work of healing, alignment, and actually feeling alive again. I'm Misha Vayner, trauma-informed transformation mentor, holistic health and life coach, and mom of 3, here to inspire you to break free from burnout, reconnect with yourself, and create a life that actually feels like home. And we're not pretending it's all deep and serious 24/7 because real growth, it's sacred, but it's also messy, hilarious, and sometimes best understood through a pop culture analogy. Each week, you'll hear inspiring stories of resilience, soulful conversations about healing, reinvention, optimizing your well-being, and honest insights to help you move from struggle to flow in motherhood, marriage, friendships, career, and beyond. I'm endlessly curious about what makes people tick and thrive, whether it's a breakthrough moment, a hidden grocery cart treasure, or even a Bravo show revelation. Because healing isn't just found in the heavy work, it's woven into the everyday human experience. Real life isn't polished, growth isn't linear, but within the real, raw moments, there's a path forward, and you don't have to walk it alone. Hit subscribe and let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Your Well Life. I'm so excited to have Jacqueline Shaw here today. She is a 7-figure mentor and spiritual teacher who is here to activate your voice, your power, and your truth. She is known for taking her clients to the depths of their sacred wisdom and guiding them to a state of pure embodiment. Through her work, clients develop a deep trust within themselves, unapologetically show up to lead in their power, and experience quantum leaps in both their business and their personal lives. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Hello. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Based on our connection before and our conversations before, I'm really excited to dive in and see what comes forward today.
Yes, I just want to say when I was reading that intro, it literally rings so true to me, even though I've only virtually known you for a short amount of time. From the moment I was drawn to you, which, by the way, for the listeners and just for the sake of this conversation, really connecting, I was going through navigating a transition in my business and my life where I was having to make some decisions that I think I'm still navigating around leaning into trust against logic and being able to find evidence that even though I had all the fears, that it was going to be the way forward. And even though there was that knowing inside, I was in the space of seeking evidence. And I posted in the Alpha Femme group, and somebody said, "You've got to listen to Jaclyn Shaw." And I had mentioned somewhere in that post, I don't even remember, something about how, or maybe I didn't, but they said that you had owned a retail store before. And I was like, this is wild. I also owned a retail store before. Went to your podcast. And it was interesting too, how I was led by it, because there was a long list of recommendations, but somehow it jumped out at me. I went to it. And the second I listened to the first episode, I was blown away and moved, because it was in this world of constantly feeling, I feel as a 6-line like you, I've always felt this need to follow this rigid structure of way of teaching and guiding and conforming in ways that just never felt right to me. And it was so incongruent. And I've been on this journey of almost like exploring and finding that way forward that allows me to honor my way of honoring my voice and my truth and letting that be enough without having the 3-step process at the end. And I listened to you, and before you even explained what your activations, I felt in my body, like again and again, I kept feeling these shifts and like this unlocking and this knowing and this remembrance from hearing your stories, and you not saying, do it this way, do it that way, or these are the 3 steps, you sharing from your authenticity, from your truth, your vulnerability. And it brought me to tears. And then the more that I started to just like lean into following you and learning about you, it was like just learning about the fact that we had kids the same age, that one's name the same, that you're also a projector, that, and then it just continued to go on around me being intrigued by some of the stories around in your marriage and learning to retrust, like their journey and moving to Costa Rica. There just became all of these parts of me that became so curious and empowered by witnessing the way you live, the way you love, the way you lead, who you are, and just how powerfully you embrace your unique essence and truth, and how permission giving and healing it is. And so I was like, I got to talk to this lady. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you, because everything you shared there in those words, I will tell you, it's been a journey for me to step in and lead in this way. And now that I am, like, I can't even imagine leading in any other way. And I've done this is how you're supposed to lead, and these are the process, and follow this, and somebody else knows better than I do. So let them just tell me how, and I'll do what they say. And when I first launched my podcast, I was launching it when I first launched my personal brand. So I had been in a business partnership for years that was really successful. And then I just felt this true calling of it is more your voice, your stories, your medicine, energetics, frequency, talking about spirituality. Like this is where you're being called to step in. And so I shifted away from more of the traditional business coaching that I was doing to step in full ownership of who I am and my voice. And like when I say that was a journey, like it truly was a journey. I actually got very lost in this industry.
Mm.
When I first came in, it was like I knew who I was. I had the conviction. I was like, wow, the fact that I get to have these conversations, yes, please, more, please. And then I got lost a bit and oh, wait, I'm not doing it the right way. I'm not doing it her way. I'm not doing it the way that you're supposed to do in order to scale. And so I did get lost. And then the beginning of my podcast really was the reclaiming of who I am, leading in conversations around trust, harnessing our personal power, like tuning into the sacred wisdom within you and bringing that forward and sharing through storytelling. Like the more that we share, and I believe this so collectively as women
Mm.
share through our lived experiences, like that lands for people. And so I am constantly sharing stories. I'm constantly like sharing, like, this is how I see things. This is my lens. This is my perspective. And it's all just in the frequency of truth sharing. And I do believe that this is what allows people to feel exactly what you talked about there. Codes being unlocked in an instant. Because when I speak my truth, you're reminded of your truth. It's all tapping into divine remembrance. So when you remember through my voice, it's not because I'm the way or I'm the guru. It's like you're tapping into your own sacred wisdom, what you've already known. It's just coming to the surface, maybe a little bit quicker or in that moment. And so, even within my mentorship, like I love powerful spaces. Like I do a lot of Telegram and Voxer mentorship where it's just like audio codes. It's like somebody can bring something to me and I'll respond with a 3-4 minute riff back. And they're like, whoa, like that just shifted everything. Because when I come in with absolute knowing, which I have, and conviction of knowing who I am and who you are, and being able to see me in my power and you in your power. When I say power, meaning like seeing the truth of who you are at a soul level, that's what it takes for people to create radical transformation in their lives, is truly being seen, but truly being guided back to self again and again, and not coming into this idea, this belief that many of us, I won't say we all, but I definitely had that somebody else knows better than I do. Somebody else's way is the way. Absolutely not. My way is the way for me. Your way is the way for you. And when we're each willing to show up in ownership of this and speak our truth within this,
100%. I think there's so many places I want to go with this. The first part is, first of all, 100%. And I was just actually reading, not that like we need the science back, but it was interesting because I was reading an article earlier about like how Jung says that, how Carl Jung is said, I forget, like, I don't want to be fixed, I want to be whole, or I forget the exact thing, and how Freud is all about fixing. And I deeply believe that too. At the end of the day, nobody knows what you need or your way. It's all within us, but we've had so much conditioning and so many things that have taken us, that have created the disconnect from ourselves. And we really just need one, people and places that, in spaces that can allow us to unfurl and remember what's underneath that and come back home to that. And through that, we have the way forward. But the problem is that So we're being continuously told that we're continuously being guided to other people outside of ourselves, but really it's witness work. It's really about holding a mirror up and just helping people like have the ability to have things reflected back to them, hear someone else's story that helped them be like, oh my God, first of all, I'm not alone. So there goes the shame. So now I can like actually unblock, unguard, release that self-protection. And then I actually come back to the clarity and the knowing. It's just so powerful. I feel very much like I'm so tired of the experts, and I get some people love the Mel Robbins and all the things, but I really feel like we need more. Like back in the day, people would come together in communities and they would barter and they would tell stories and they would share and they bring their wares. And it was just a space for you to share. And I feel, yes, but here's the thing. So I too have had that knowing for so long around like knowing that storytelling and sharing from my lived experiences has been what is my way, what is healing to other people, what is healing for me, quite frankly, is as a self-projected projector in speaking. But then it's interesting because there's so much I have experienced like the past few months, the more that I've leaned into that authority of mine, I've experienced a lot of pushback, and not from my people, but the random interworld. So it's been this experiment of what goes behind a paywall, what stays sacred, and I wondered if, was it just immediate in you having that resonance, or was there an experimentation of how to do it in a way where, because I find that in the Wild West online, there's sometimes some people don't have context. And when it's too personal, they want to rip apart this part. And you're like, no. So it's hard, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to take us back 1 second and then bring us into this because I feel like this is an important element. Like when you were talking a little bit ago about sitting in witness and this mirror work, it's like when I can sit in sacred witness of you, when you can sit in sacred witness of self, when I can allow myself also to be sacredly witness for who I am and within my truth. This for me is what creates like the powerful expansion in our energy field. We come back to this knowing again and again of who we are, our willingness to claim it, our willingness to be it, our willingness to stand in it, our willingness to speak it. Now, within that, one thing that is a really, I feel, allowed me to step in this way is to allow multiple truths to coexist, which means I don't need other people to understand me. I don't need other people to get it. I'm okay with being misunderstood. I'm okay with being judged. I'm okay with being rejected because that also shows that I'm willing to not back down, to not dilute my voice in favor of more people understanding, more people getting it, people liking me, people not saying bad things about me on the internet, whatever it is. And so I wouldn't say that this was automatic. Like when you asked, like there was like harnessing my personal power to be willing to stand in this and hold this. But interesting enough, like, of course, today's we're having this conversation because I've just been going through an experience where I've just written a book and it's not out in the world yet. It's not ready to be read. It's in the behind the scenes stages of working with a literary agent and finding a publisher. So it's still probably a little while to come out into the world, but I finished writing this book and I've already received rejection from it from one of my spiritual mentors who I've worked with for years. And really in that I'm sharing too much of my story, too much of the parts that are shameful, too much of the parts that should be kept hidden. And he very much said, and it's not needed. Just share your wisdom because the wisdom is so deep and the wisdom is so powerful. Remove the story. And I was like, absolutely not. And I really sat with it. I sat with it for a little bit. I reread, I refined, I looked at it, I took some pieces away and then ultimately added them all back in. Because for me, the wisdom without the story isn't truly wisdom at all. The wisdom came from the experience. And so again, being able to hold myself in this mentor and somebody who I have and who I continue to really like
Respect
absolutely had these fields, and there was like many promises about the things that he was going to do for this book once it was written in his hands, and all of that has now fallen away because I chose to stay in my truth of this is my book and this is the story and this is how I want to share it. And why I say it's interesting that we're having this conversation is I've stayed so strong within that these past couple months. And just yesterday, I saw Megan Watterson, and I love Megan Watterson. She posted something along these lines, and I'm totally paraphrasing here, but like this is our holy work as women to be willing to share our truth, to be willing to share our stories, even when they bring about what others see as shameful, even when they brings about judgment. And she was sharing this from the lens of she has a new book coming out and it received a bad review, and she's all the what went on in her body and the emotions and the feels, and ultimately coming back to truth. And as women, especially, like our voices have gotten lost in different ways because we've given away our power because of past life experiences, because, so many different reasons why our voices have been silenced and our truth has been hidden. And I feel it takes us right now as women to say no more.
Agree. And I feel to your point is like there's so many different layers of like recommitment to that, because I feel like there's been so many, I've been doing this work for so long as well, and there's been so many times that I've been like or whatever, but then there becomes like a new confronting like level that, and it's, I don't know what the right word is, but it's like just a new opportunity to strengthen even more, root into more. It's like a new test at a new, like you're saying, like a new level. And I don't know, are you familiar with Glennon Doyle?
I am.
So I love her. And I feel like the thing that I love most about her, I went to her podcast tour last week. And the thing that I've always loved about her is through her writing and through reading her writing, I just continuously feel seen, and it makes me feel less alone, and it helps heal me. And in the days that I feel that, and from that place, I, even if there's literally no tips and her story is nothing, but it's nothing to do with mine, it helps me remember my power and get the clarity. But it's not, to your point, when it's like not just about the story without the wisdom, like it wouldn't be, because I need to hear that she was on the bathroom floor with the pregnancy test. Like, even though that wasn't me, I'm able to connect to that moment, that emotion, that visceral emotion that you can't actually without the color, without the, and it's, I think, yeah, as women, that's what we want. We want to connect, and you can't connect just without. So anyway, I really appreciate that. I want
Well,
to.
one thing I just want to say in reflection of this before we move on is, so I've given some of my clients have had the opportunity to read the first part of my book. There's 4 parts, and they've read the first part. And this is exactly what they've said. Without this, and even though I don't have the same experience or the same situation as you, I can see where I do that in a relationship with my mother, with my child, with my this. And so it's like we don't need to have the exact same experiences to get from someone else's story, but it's bringing people into, and this is what I was thinking, and this is what I was feeling, and this is where I was at, and this is where I wanted to choose self-righteousness because that human part of me came forward. This is where I wanted to choose the like vindication, that I wanted to choose to be the victim, like whatever it is. And this was, I think, the piece that really caught me from Megan Watterson yesterday too. So when I had this experience with my mentor originally, it took me years to write this book, but I had just before claimed, like knew I was a writer. Before this, I had kept telling myself, I'm not a writer, I'm not a writer, I'm not a writer, I'm not a writer. So of course the book didn't get written. Then I wrote the book and I felt so like I'm a writer that I started writing a second book. And so when I received this feedback from him, now I've started writing a third book. Now I'm just like, okay, all the books want to be written right now. But I was like, I decided, not based on anyone else's experience outside of me, not based on somebody who's published 40 books, not loving the beginning of my book and wanting me to delete the first 13 chapters. I decided I was a writer, and I stayed steadfast in that and held that. And I honestly can say I haven't wavered in that within this experience. There's been emotions, there's been sadness of letting go of something I thought was going to be, but I haven't wavered in the space of knowing that I'm a writer. Now, sharing this because what Megan shared yesterday with in light of this experience, and I mean, her book, Mary Magdalene Revealed, was like I just love that book. And hearing this review about another book that she had, I just like part like that voice within me wanted to say, and you're never going to write again. Can you
Our inner
imagine?
critic
Can
is
you
so intense.
imagine what happens if we decide not to write again, not to record that podcast again, not to lead that course, not to share that story, like not to, because somebody else sees something different than what you see.
Yes. Two things came to mind at the same time. The first thing being like, yeah, it's a constant practice, I believe, for us to continuously recognize that like egoic mind that wants to constantly keep us small and safe and constantly work with it. It's like a commitment, I feel like. At least mine gets crazy. So I feel like that. I think it's like a devotion to knowing how to recognize it. And I think the second thing is just I led a women's circle last Saturday, and this is going back to what you were talking about regarding women hearing your story and saying, I didn't go through X experience, but I experienced, or I need that to lean into that emotion for this experience or whatever, this thing that I'm going through. Every single one of the women, first of all, the leading the women's circle was, I think probably it was equally as healing for me as it was for every other woman. But hearing each woman's stories, I didn't have the same experience as any of them, but I found myself crying and releasing from stuff inside of me that I feel like I had the borrowed benefits from watching them release from something they were going through that was stuck inside of me from God knows when. I felt myself excited and expanded for things I hadn't celebrated by hearing someone else. And that can only happen from this storytelling, by you just talking about the things. You can't have that visceral experience that is so deeply healing. And I feel like I just love that you're so rooted in this type of work. And I also love that this type of approach to not approaching it like I'm sitting at the top of the ivory tower and I have the answers. No, I'm a living embodiment of my truth. And through doing that, I am giving you permission and I'm modeling. And also, I just want to be a continuous source of resourcing for you to continuously have that powerful experience within yourself. Oh, it's
Yes,
such
like
a
this,
gift.
like that right there. Like I am the living embodiment. This is it. This is what we're all being called to bring forward. And I love, and I know we're maybe just going rogue here, but we're going. I love
We're
what
going.
you just shared about holding that space. So I just held my in-person experience in Costa Rica that I host every year. I've just actually launched that I'm hosting my first ever silent retreat coming up next October. And within this, you and I are both projectors. Sometimes, not sometimes, I've often been asked, like, how do you hold space like that? And like in person and that many days and that deep when you're a projector. And the thing is, like, these spaces, just like you said, they're also life-giving to me. They're nurturing for me because I'm not holding women in their pain or their suffering. I'm holding them in their light. I'm seeing them for who they are at a soul level, and that's allowing that to come forward from within them. So they're touching the God within, they're remembering their divine essence. And yes, things are shedding and being released, and sometimes there's big emotions coming forward, but then I'm not holding that. So I'm in that experience. I get to sit in sacred witness. I get to guide. I get to lead in these powerful activations. And so we shift frequencies like very rapidly when we're willing to come into spaces like this together, not from a fix-it energy. I want to even say, not from a
Performative.
healing energy in the sense of to be healed, to heal this wound and this wound. It's like, for me, it's like going through, bringing everything to the surface in order to expand, in order to grow and evolve at the level of my human and the level of my soul.
Yes, I want to echo and just add something to that. And that, like, I think, yeah, the energy, I feel that same way in that holding that space is one, it's not performative. There's no doing. It's like instead of mentoring or coaching, it's almost doulaing or midwifing, where you're just like lovingly holding this space. It's almost a lean out instead of a lean in, where you're like, I've got you, like a mama. And because of that, really a maternal, feminine, loving, supportive, safe embrace energetically, a person can unfurl. And that can only happen from another person holding you. Otherwise, we are in our like constant hypervigilance. And so we do need that other person to do it, even if there's no doing. And so I think that's why, to your point, you're not sitting there like trying to do things. You're just leaning out. And it does require someone who is grounded in self and at peace with self and able to hold that. But
Yeah.
it has the capacity. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I
Well,
really
and this allows too for, like you said this a while back, but how we were talking about going outside of yourself and searching outside of yourself for somebody else knowing the way or the wisdom. And the truth is, when we're in our human mind, we also don't know our own way. Like when we're moving from a place of control and figuring out and fixing, like we are so limited when we move from our human mind, but when we can drop in to our soul, when we can shut out that outside noise, when we because from our mind we move based on what we know, what we've experienced, what we have evidence for. Our fears come in and create the limitation. There's the, like you said, the fear of judgment and the this and the that. And so when we come back into self in this way, when we're held in the frequency of love and sacred spaces, when we can tune in, like this is where the source of wisdom is always going to come from within us at the soul level.
If you ever found yourself wondering, but how do you really navigate that? You're not alone. The most common questions I get from this community aren't just about the tools or the steps, they're about the real behind the scenes journey. So I created The Deep Well, a private space where I share raw personal stories, unfiltered insights, and the deeper lessons I don't always share publicly. It's also where you can send me your personal questions about motherhood, healing, burnout, purpose, relationships, and I'll answer them inside the feed with thoughtful, trauma-conscious guidance, practical suggestions, and any resources I believe could support you. If you're craving more depth, real talk, and real connection, check the show notes. I'd love to see you inside. Yes. I have a question actually on that. You know how earlier you were saying that what really helped you shift from embodiment of honoring your truth in it, like you knew cognitively, and then as you started podcasting and having the conversations, it really started to are you a self-projected projector, or what is your
I'm not. I'm like, wait, what do I have? Emotional authority. But because I have 8 of my 9 centers defined in my human design, and I really feel like I move a lot as a splenic projector. My G
Mm,
center, I feel like really guides me. Like I feel so strong in my G center and in my defined spleen. And while I do have an emotional authority, I've actually talked about this a lot. I tend to, at this point, in really understanding my human design and following these splenic hits, there's a lot of times where there is no emotion in the sense of attached to the decisions that I'm making. And so because there's not emotion in the sense of like I move a lot from I know because I know. So feeling those
mm.
spleen hits and moving, feeling that G center, I know because I know, feeling and moving from there. And this is a human design side conversation. If I don't move in connection with my knowing, if I wait, if I hesitate, if I go to my head and weigh the pros and cons and analyze, that's actually what kicks me into the emotional wave. And then I feel paralyzed. Then I feel, oh my gosh. And so I
That's
really am
interesting.
aware of if I'm not in that heightened emotional high or low, it's can I just trust myself to feel with what I know, to move with what I know, to decide based on what I know. Again, not because I know it from my mind, but because I feel it.
Yeah. No, I really love your very clear articulation and understanding of knowing of self and knowing how you operate. It's interesting for me as a self-projected projector, but I actually have predominantly all open centers. I absorb a lot of energy and I actually move much more like a reflector. I have a subconscious like a reflector because of how open and how much I absorb. And I have 3 kids. So for me, 2 things. One is that I found when you meant the reason I bring this up is because when you mentioned starting a podcast, I get clarity through speaking versus staying in the head, how you were
Yeah.
saying. And what I've found is through starting this journey of the podcast, it's really been expansive in my process. But also, what I've found is that this is going to sound crazy, but I remember a few months ago, or maybe it was last year, I don't know, I went to some energy healer person. Point is, I received a download and information that like I don't actually always need a person to talk to, that I can basically talk to the powers that be. And I've actually been in the morning sometimes if I don't feel like telegramming my assistant or whatever it is, I will literally start to just have a conversation with God and just start to ask for, and even it's just gets my like I get my clarity and then I'm like, oh, I know what I need to do.
Yeah.
And I think that it's such a powerful, I love the fact that your clarity of knowing of what shifts things for you and like that in me, I think that's something that I think is really like helpful for people to understand. Because to your point, like what works for you and I and getting that clarity and coming back to that wisdom, it's all different, right?
It's different, but I can tell you for each of us, there is
Yes.
an aspect that's going to be the same. You're not going to get clarity when you're going to your mind. And so
No,
there,
yes,
when you
100%.
speak it, when you, and so it's like for everyone listening, it's like when you speak it, when you feel it, when you have that connection and you
When you
talk
write,
to
yeah,
God, when you write, and for each of us, funny enough, I just shared about like now I've claimed I'm a writer and writing books, but
yes,
I don't write in a journal. I am somebody who more, and this is why I was explaining how it works
yes.
for me as human design. I'm not a self-projected, but because I have that G center and that throat connection, like same for me, it's like the more I speak. So having a podcast, like having places to freely express myself, like this is what allows me, I would say, to stay out of my head, is not overthinking it. Can I be so free to speak my truth, to be my truth, to live my truth, to decide and make decisions based on, I'm going to say my truth, but not truth that I have evidence for, but just truth of I know who I am as a divine being. I know who you are. I know who we are as divine beings. So that's the truth I move from, not the, I'm going to say the false evidence that I have in my mind. That I
Absolutely.
see, that's easy as a human to see as truth. Like we think what we've experienced before is truth, and it's not.
Yeah, where we have so many layers of trauma, and I feel it's hard. Some people might find it hard to discern what is their like trauma and what in versus what their like truth is. But I feel as though the more that you continue to feel that inner whisper and that nudge, that piece, I feel that is truth. Everything that's telling you can't or you shouldn't, that's the fear. So anything that, just for anyone listening, I feel like, and I think it's so easy to confuse the two, but if you think of it of if there's a no, there's a desire, that's your North Star, right? Like
Yeah.
I want to go actually, and by the way, I'm so glad you spoke about your book because that was on my list of things because that's something that I aspire to do as well. And I would just love to, I know you spoke a good bit about it, but just to close that and go to the next thing. When you started that journey, was it just, did you just start to, was it with their mentor? Or did you just start to like free write? What was the process like?
Yeah, so it wasn't with a mentor at
Mm,
all, to be honest. The kickstart of my mentor was he just knew I was writing a book. And he was like, basically, this was a year ago. And he was like, okay, if you have it written by your birthday, it was like I knew by my birthday, it was my 44th birthday this year. 44 just represents a lot for me. And he's like, hey, if you write it by your 44th birthday, like this and this and this. And so he kickstarted me into, okay, there's a deadline, which wasn't, I mean, it was a deadline, but a loose-ish deadline and a deadline that was like almost a year long. But truthfully, like this deadline served me, and I'm not someone who typically likes deadlines. This deadline served me, but that was the extent of his involvement in this, was just like, okay. And so then it was up to me to write the book. And I will tell you, I stopped and started writing this book so many times. I first started writing this book 8 years ago. And then there was still a lot of like voices. There was still a lot of who cares about this story. There was you're not a writer. There was all of this stuff, but there was still this knowing within me, like this story is meant to be shared because there's so much wisdom within it as well. And so this kickstart from my mentor last April, like what I thought was gonna be like, okay, get that pen in hand. There was resistance for me to get this pen in hand. As I said, like before this, I wasn't a writer at all. And the idea of sitting down to write a book, I was like, I don't know how to write a book. I've never written a book. I'm not a writer. And so instead of trying to write a book, what I did was literally I lived part-time in Costa Rica in the jungle. I lived part-time in Canada in the mountains, and I have this beautiful forested property in my backyard here. I literally sat in my backyard with a notepad, with a pen, and I just started writing. But I didn't try to write a book. I just started writing whatever came through for me. I just started writing about trust. I just started writing about faith. I started writing about letting go of control. I started writing about all these things that came through from a lived experience that I had in my life. But I didn't write the story. At first, I wrote the wisdom. I wrote like just out in the forest by hand. And then I started to connect in, oh, like this piece of my story is really where I embodied this, where I tapped into this like divine remembrance and this wisdom from. And so sat out in the forest and wrote. And then I thought I had written a lot more than I had. And it was about 3 weeks before this deadline to write my book. At this point, I'd moved to Costa Rica for the year, the rest of the year. And when I sat there, I was like, okay, you've just written a bunch of things, but it's not connected in a book. It's not, there's a bunch of like literally papers. What I had done from the papers that I had handwritten was I voice transcribed them. I printed off all these papers that were just literally scattered thoughts of wisdom. And I sat for 3 weeks of, okay, this, I want this to match with this. I cut and pasted from these printed off things. Like, I want this to be the beginning, this to be the middle, this to be the end. I want to take this out. I want to add this. And really, there was this year of production of it, but I would say I really wrote this book in 3 weeks because once I like had that, like once I had that to come forward with, it was like, it was, I want to say it was like easy to just write it, to put it together, to be like, oh yeah, the story and the wisdom in the story. And one way in which I've written this book, which a woman who edited it for me, she was like, it's very masterful in the way of, she's like, I love how you do it. She's like, you almost tell the story that I think I'm reading a fiction book, and then you drop in with the wisdom. I'm like, wow, this is really her life. And you really do this dance of like story and wisdom and story. And she's, and then I feel like I get the wisdom before you even explain the wisdom through the story, but then you drop deeper into the wisdom. And
Oh,
so I'm really quite in love with this
I'm
book, which is
so
why the
proud of
idea of changing it was a no. But again, like everything, it was a journey. But I will tell you, it became easier to write when I finally decided I'm a writer, which I did on
you.
January 7th. I did on January 7th. I decided I was a writer after, it was long after I'd sat in the forest and written it all. And I decided on January 7th I was a writer. And by January 30th, my birthday, like the book was written.
Oh, it literally, it's not even just a book, it's like a work of art. And like your transmission on those pages and everything that's come through, like I just cannot imagine how like world shifting and healing and empowering and just enlightening it's going to be for so many. I cannot wait. Did
I
you pitch it to to public, to what is it,
I
publishers?
I love that you said that about a work of art because I mean I've never used those words before, but that truly is what it feels like to me. That it feels
Yeah,
like art. It doesn't.
masterpiece. It's a
Yeah.
masterpiece of all masterpieces.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I'm just in that space because I've sat with it for a few months. Like I shared before, there was already a thought of it was going to a certain literary agent and publisher through my mentor, and that hasn't happened. And so I'm just within, you're right, fresh with this with me, just in the last week, I put it out to a few different literary agents. So I'm just in that, like creating the
Process.
magic with whoever I'm going to create this magic with.
Oh, I'm so excited to follow along. I'll be cheering you on the sidelines.
Thank
I
you.
want to ask you one more question about what we were talking about, and then I want to move on to stuff about your marriage, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, I have a question about what you've been in. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've been in moments where you've had financial instability, but had to lean into trust, even when everything was telling you to choose a different path. And so I wanted to see if you could share any wisdom or insights around how you navigated that in both like practical terms as well as energetically of being in that space.
Oh gosh, I mean, I feel like there's so many stories
Yeah,
that I
I
can
know.
share here. There's so many
I could talk to you for
moments.
hours.
Yeah. So what can I share here that feels like it will really like serve this conversation? Yeah, there's definitely been parts in my journey where people have thought I was absolutely insane and like crazy for making the decisions that I've made, and that think it irresponsible. And to give you like the quickie on this, at the beginning of my beginning of journey in mentorship and growing my business, I made a very significant investment in my business and in mentorship. And at the time, I was solely the financial provider for my family. I had two young kids. I was paying rent that was like a minimal amount of rent, but it was like a month to month. Are we going to be able to pay the rent this month type of space? And at the same time, yes, that was the truth and the reality. It was like very month to month. Credit cards were maxed out and there was $200,000 of debt. There also was the everything was being met. Like my kids were getting enrolled in ski school. I was still traveling. Just to give like that full context, I never felt like I was needing to sacrifice either. Like it was just like, this is life and this is the way it is, and money out. And there's always just enough was really the energy. There's always just enough. And I knew I was really ready to break that story, to break that code, that there's always just enough, like just enough for the things that you want. But then you might be like a little bit short on rent this month. You might have to pay the bills a little bit late. There might be a little bit more credit card debt or whatever there was, which I was, to be honest, was fine with it. I was fine with the credit card debt. I was fine with choosing to live my life. But I knew at this point, I was like, okay, there's $200,000 of debt. And my true feels on this was like, hey, if that was my experience, like I wasn't going to stay in debt forever. So there had to be a pathway for me to shift this story and shift this narrative. And I really felt this call to work with Melanie and Lair, who's the founder of Alpha Femme, who I'm now partner up and collaborate with. And I really felt the calling. And it felt like choosing to not make that move and that investment in myself was denying my soul. And so I
Yes.
that even though I didn't know, I did not know. And in fact, I chose it with, I'd already started to grow an online business. I already had money coming in, but this meant with that investment, I was going to need to double my monthly income to be able to pay for that investment and pay for my life and my family and our bills. And I was already, in order to make that investment, I had asked my landlord if I could pay rent 2 weeks late. So there was definitely not a clear pathway of this is going to work
But you
because
knew.
that evidence, but I knew not making that move because it felt like such a strong desire. It felt like such a strong, like how the opportunity to work with her opened up. It felt like not answering the call of my soul. And so
Yes.
what I became unwilling to do. And this was one experience in the beginning was like, if I don't deny my soul here, like if I already know who I am, what I'm available for, not from this is what I know I can make happen because I have the evidence or because whatever it is, it's because I feel it inside that there is something more for me to access. There's something more for me to lead in. There's something more for me to own. Like I'm ready to change this story. This is where I moved first. Like I stood behind my belief of what I knew to be true inside me, and then I became the creator of the evidence.
Yes, I feel like the universe responds to clear alignment with truth. And if you are willing to lean into that, even when it feels like there's no evidence and so scary, but if you're willing to do that, I feel like things can shift so quickly. But I think it's that piece where there's that piece is not as easy for everybody to double down. And so I think it's just so important. I think even just to hear that, like, truth be told, you're not always going to find the evidence, but the knowing is your guidepost, is your North Star, the knowing. I just
I
love
mean,
that.
and I have so many stories within this. Like that's in business, but also I operate this way in my life.
Yes.
This house, this like dream home, this beautiful property that I live on right now, like same sort of situation. Like we had no business buying this property. Like literally a week before we found this house, my husband had said, like basically like the cost of this type of property and houses, we're probably like 18 months to 2 years away from being able to purchase something like that. And we'd have to save and we'd have to like blah, blah, blah. And then a week later, I was like, we were living in Costa Rica. We saw this property online. And I was like, we get that house, like, I'll move back to Canada. And he's no, remember the conversation last week, like 18 months to 2 years of saving? And I was like, I don't think that's true. And honestly, we bought the house, did a long closing. It was a 4 month close. And I was like, it's gonna get figured out within that 4 months. And it was the day before the closing that actually enough money hit our bank account to be able to do the closing.
Oh, oh my God, chills. It is just, you can't make this up. It's actually, let's segue into your husband because I'm also, there's so many things. Like we said, I could talk to you for
Sorry,
hours.
I have to interrupt that I said
Oh,
that.
sorry.
No, I just, as you were saying about husband, I was like, there's one thing I feel like I want
Oh,
to say because recently I've had someone tell me that it's irresponsible the way I talk about money in this way, and like that you can just go
oh,
buy a house and not have the money, and it shows up. And the thing is, in context of this conversation, I don't feel it's irresponsible because this is my absolute truth. And so I'm
yes,
saying
girl.
go rack up $200,000 of credit card debt and just go buy a house and not have any, but I knew. And so what feels more irresponsible to me feels like diluting that, not sharing my stories, not sharing my truth. Like I do lead in so much trust and so much faith. And because I made those decisions, not from my mind, but from that soul calling, that desire that was nudging me, that's where I can have absolute faith. And so sharing experiences like this to me does not feel irresponsible. It feels powerful.
Expansive.
This is where we share these codes of what's available and what's possible when we don't get caught up in the limitations that our mind brings forward.
Hey, Mama, imagine if healing your stress patterns could change everything. Because it can. Whether it's reacting in ways you don't recognize, people pleasing, or overthinking, these patterns stem from unresolved trauma stored in your body. They create chronic stress, impacting your health, relationships, and how you show up in life. That's why I created the Align and Thrive Workbook, a free 5-day mini training designed to help you heal at the root. You'll learn what trauma is and how it's showing up in your body and life. You'll be guided through a proven 5-step process to heal and rewire these patterns, shifting from reactive and overwhelmed to aligned and in flow. You'll get a comprehensive workbook filled with practices and journal prompts to help you implement this work starting now. It's truly transformational. It's what I wish I had when I was struggling on my journey, and it's completely free. Download your Align and Thrive workbook for free today. Head to www.mishavayner.com/workbook and let's begin this journey together. You can also click on the link in the show notes and grab it today.
I 100% agree. And I think that it's also a constant thing around there. It's more accepted to share like stories of woe and contracting stories. And it's like the moment someone say it's easier to say it's irresponsible. In fact, let's celebrate how incredible that evidence is and use that as an opportunity for us to say, oh, I can have that too. I can. And I feel like it's just, in fact, it's so uncomfortable for so many because of exactly what we were talking about before. We've been taught that like to shrink and all the things. And so I'm so glad that you said that. And I also really appreciate the disclaimer because it just speaks to what we were talking about at the beginning of how things get taken out of context and all of a sudden, and you're just like, no. So I totally get it. I'm so with you. Thank you for saying that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Now you can lead into my husband. Now I'm ready for it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, no. So and by the way, I actually want to tell you in regards to something you just shared. I offline have to tell you something. But anyway, I'm so moved by your story with your husband. And by the way, is there anything that is off limits to, okay, I figured as much not, but
No.
I think that there's so many things, there's so many beautiful lessons from your story around experiencing the infidelity, but then finding forgiveness and rebuilding trust. And I think that it's so much easier to run away. And I just want to talk to you about what you tapped into around finding forgiveness and rebuilding trust. I think that those are two things that so many people really struggle with and don't know is possible. They just don't think it's possible. And you are perfect evidence that the hardest of circumstances, and you have such a beautiful family now. So I would just love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you saying that and saying it would have been easier to run. I wanted to run away when this was the experience within my marriage. I was 3 months pregnant with my daughter. I had a 2-year-old son. I was the type of woman who had always said I would never. And like, I would never. And if there was infidelity in my relationship, gone faster than like fast could be. I mean, I could tell you like stories and stories and stories. I mean, for years before I even met my husband and had kids, I was like ready to raise a baby and be a single mom on my own. So there was real no, like, I need to hang on to my marriage here. We need to fix this and this needs to work. And yet, when I found myself in this experience, it just also felt like the truth for me. And it was just this like clarity within my knowing that our journey wasn't over yet and our story wasn't over yet. So, as badly as I wanted to close the door on our marriage, as badly as I wanted to run, this is really when I decided to get out of my humanness and like really come in, what is there for me within this experience? And this is what I really dove into and looked at for myself. I was like, there's no coincidence that this is happening when I'm pregnant with my daughter and I can't respond with the rage and the alcohol and the wild sex with random strangers and whatever I've chosen in that moment. Like, to me, I was like, there's no coincidence in the timing of this. It definitely felt like an invitation that God had been knocking for a while. It definitely felt like an invitation to go deeper into the remembrance of who I am as a divine being. And within that, I really looked through the lens of, okay, what am I being called to dive into here? Where am I being called to grow and to expand and to move forward from here? And I found myself in some very uncomfortable moments where, so I was 3 months pregnant with my daughter. My husband started having an affair. I found out the day that it started to happen, or within 2 days of it. And it continued for 8 months, but I wouldn't say continued for 8 months. Like, we separated right away when I found out, and he lived with another woman for 8 months, and I was pregnant with my daughter and went through the pregnancy on my own. But within this time, when I say there were some uncomfortable moments, like the moment where I was in meditation and like God was send him love and send him peace. And this is really a story of shifting out of victimhood. And it was like, send him love, send him peace. And I started to do that. And I felt the energy shift between us. I witnessed the energy shift between him and I. And then there was a few weeks went by and it was like, now send her, this other woman, send her love, send her peace. And I was like, God, no fucking way. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but
yes,
no, like,
you are.
like, no, like, no. But I was like, the voice inside me was louder than the voice in my head. And it was like, okay, like, I'm going to send her peace and love. And I started to really see in this, I'm like, I don't know her story. I don't know her story. I don't know her soul journey. And I think this was really the doorway and the lens into forgiveness for me, was recognizing that I don't know anyone else's like experience here. I don't know anyone else's story. I'd say I started to really release judgment of the experience, which ultimately led to the forgiveness, because when there was no judgment of it anymore, there was almost was like nothing left to forgive, but not in the sense of it's all okay and put the Band-Aid solution on. There was a lot to go through within this, but when I wasn't making either of them wrong or the villain, when they weren't the villain, I got to step out of not being the victim. And I started to see this woman where she got lost on her journey and got sidetracked from being the love that she is. And so instead of, again, painting her as the villain and judging her and just deciding that all these things about her, I softened into divine remembrance of who I am and who she is and who he is, and went through different layers of letting go of judgment, and again releasing, when I said earlier, that want to be like those moments of self-righteousness, those moments where I'm like, but I'm right, those moments where I'm like, and they're wrong and they're bad and they're the villains and they're the this. And was a lot of, again, softening with a lot of experiences of surrender and letting go and trust and faith, and continuing to hold on to this feeling that I had, that there was more in this story, there was more on this journey for all of us, and at the same time honoring myself within the whole experience.
Yeah. Wow. No, I think it's like interesting how it all ties back in that it's like the moment that we're able to lay it all down, like all of the protection and all of the things, and we come back to this open space of the humanity that we all experience, and really remember that all of us are just, I know it sounds, I don't know if trite's the right word, but everyone is, I feel that at the end, everyone's good, and our actions and behaviors are all just us trying to navigate our own mess of whatever the way that plays out. But if you're in connection or in relationship with somebody who really deeply knows underneath all of that who you are deep down, and is able to hold that while the other stuff gets worked out, which requires someone who has a level of capacity and is as tapped in as you are, but still, it's not that it requires that, but then you can actually, and then you're doing your both a favor, because who wants to carry that shit around? All of that anger.
Yeah. And the thing within this, like, this is 9 years ago in my life. And I didn't know I had the capacity, like that you're talking about. You're like, I didn't know I had the capacity to hold this. I didn't know I had the capacity to view him in a different light and view her in a different light. It wasn't until hindsight where I was really able to see like his abandonment wounds that had surfaced, and we're running the show based on some other experiences that had happen and some loss in our life, in our relationship, and our journey as parents. And I didn't know at the time. And I think this is
Yeah.
so powerful about the story is I think people wait to say, but maybe I don't have that conviction, or I don't have that faith, or I don't have that connection with God. I didn't have any of it when I embarked on it. Like I didn't have a deep connection with God. I had actually like really removed myself from anything to do with God, I would say. I didn't have trust before. I didn't have faith. I just kept, again, when truth felt like it was being brought forward from within me, I sat in sacred witness of myself. I was willing to get still. I was willing to be in the silence. I was meditating like 5 times a day. I was willing to listen. I saw where my human wanted to step in and choose vengeance and self-righteousness and control. And I just kept playing the game with myself. And what if I don't? What if I don't choose the things that I've always chosen? What if I don't need to be right? What if I don't need them to be the villains? What if I don't need to be the victim? What if I trust beyond this? What if, and there was many moments I was like, I could do this and just manipulate the situation and this would happen. What if I don't? What if I don't manipulate? What if I actually just go deeper in the letting go frequency? And like I said, this was 9 years ago. This is the topic of my book. Like this is the stories that's brought into my book, is the journey out of seeing myself as the victim and this like dropping into these spiritual truths. And ultimately I'll say at the end of the day, and there's been obviously a whole journey for my husband and I in the in-between and over these last 9 years, on January 30th, when my book was finished, when we went out to celebrate, when it was my birthday, when we had a glass of champagne, I actually said to my husband, like, thank you for giving me a book to write in the first place. Thank you for giving me the experience to write about. And I said it cheeky, but it's like, I actually truly felt it. Truly mean it. Like, of course, would I love that this is not an experience that I had in my life and a story that my kids are going to hear one day with their parents? Like, of course, I would like that. And I also wouldn't change it because it is what brought me on this journey of who I am today. It is what opened me up to the divine remembrance of who I am. It is what made me go down the pathway of embarking on a connection with the divine, with spirit, with God.
Yes. I just want to say, there was 400 things I wanted to say. And this one, I'm having to pick one because I know time. And I have to say what's blowing my mind right now is the fact that, the store that I had, I went into business with my ex-boyfriend and he sued me for $5 million. That's the cliff notes. It led to it was like a major betrayal and like a whole thing. Long story short, similar to you, I just jumping to the high points, I too found forgiveness and really genuinely was able to see what he was navigating way above, even though I did nothing. And not only did it, and it also invited me on this path, and I'm also writing a book about it. And I just had to say that because it's crazy how there's just so many things I'm getting chills about. So I just name that. But I also just wanted to ask, and I'm sure it's in your book. I know I think you have to go at the top of the hour, right? So, is there anything that you did as it relates to your healing work with your husband in order to get back into lockstep, or was it a continuous?
Okay, there's two things I feel called to share with you here. And one is going to feel related to this and one's not. So I'll share the one that feels related in the sense of what you asked, is again that allowing him and I to create the pathway forward and to listen to our voices from within, not what anyone else told us the journey of healing needed to look like. It was like, but you shouldn't do this, not yet, or are you ready? Or it should take more time, or it should be this or this. There was all of these opinions and ideas outside of us. And it's like, there's no manual. Nobody else has the formula. You can't go read a book and just follow somebody else's like 10 steps to get your marriage back on track and regain trust and all of these things. But this is so often what we do. And so I'd say the biggest aspect to our healing journeys and things have unraveled and over the years, but like we didn't go in with, and this is going to take time, and this is going to take this, and this is going to need this. It was like, actually, like what feels true for us right now? Can we be in truth? We both became very present with each other, bringing truth forward. There was tons of hard conversations and millions of tears shed between the two of us and a lot of deep work, but not from the place, again, of because we're so broken and things need to be fixed and this is going to take all this time and we always need to be aware of this. And there's, you know what I mean? It was really just choosing the frequency of love, standing by our choices to come back together and being like present in the now moment versus living in the past, bringing the past into the now. It was very much in the, this is where we're at and what are we going to choose? And can we hold each other in this space and grow from here? And again, in that frequency of love, but not listening to voices outside of us was massive.
I love that so much. I feel like there's so many threads, so many things about you that I know everyone in this world is unique, but that make you such a really unique individual about the way that you just never conform to all of the societal bullshit that so many do. And I just feel like Jacqueline for president. Like I said, I could talk to you for hours. I had 500 things, and I just want to like thank you for giving me the gift of your presence and your heart and just all of your wisdom. Like, I know that this conversation is going to help so many people, is going to empower so many people. And I would love it if you wanted to share, if you have any programs or any where people could find you, if they wanted to follow you.
Yes, absolutely. And I know we said the top of the hour, but there's two things that I feel like I
Oh,
can't
please,
not share before I get there. So we're just gonna
yes.
that because what you said there at the end too, the Jacqueline for president energy, the things like that not conforming comes from I truly trust that like I know, just like I trust that like we know, I mean, as women, as mothers, what's right and correct, not right because it's right or wrong, but what's correct for us and our family and our children. And so I raise my kids in a very unconventional way, and we unschool and we live part of the time in Costa Rica and part of the time in Canada. And like, it's the life that my kids know. And people are often like, but don't they need this? And don't they want structure? And don't they need blah, blah, blah? And stability in this home base. I'm like, this really works for us. And then funny enough, yesterday, my daughter, we've always unschooled. My daughter was like, we're back in Canada. There's 6 weeks left in school. And I want to go to school with my friends. And I was like, my husband was like, your mom's not going to let you go to like real school. And I was like, yeah, here I am. And he's what? And he's like, you don't like believe in the structures of school systems. I'm like, she wants to go test it out for 6 weeks. Like she can go test it out for 6 weeks. I also feel like I'm here and I'm willing to like, explore and see and feel things out. And I do have strong beliefs. It's like, I'm also willing to allow my children to grow and evolve, and I'm not going to control their journey either.
Can I just say one thing? I hate to interrupt you. Yes, yeah. The thing I meant to say earlier when you were speaking about, when I asked you the question about your marriage and what you guys do to continue to deepen it or to get in lockstep or whatever I said, when you said that you continue to basically, and you said this earlier, you just continue to show that you continue to stay curious. That's what it is. You're just perpetually curious. And I think that at the end of the day is you're open and curious. You're not rigid about anything. You're connected to your knowing and you're open into seeing into what's possible. And I think, again, like that's so incredible. And that also shows how much inner psychological safety you've built to be able to access that.
This is going to lend perfectly into the last piece that I wanted to share, because you asked me about trust a couple of times, and that element that you just brought in, that inner safety. And so it's like, when I trust in like my knowing, trusting in like I can say yes to things, I can say no to things, I can follow my truth. This is ultimately what creates trust for me. It's like I choose to trust. I choose to trust in myself. So it wasn't about, can I build trust up within my husband and within my marriage? It was truly, can I get so deeply connected to myself that I have absolute unwavering trust within myself? Then that rippled out into trusting within my marriage, trusting my kids to make the decisions that they want to make. But it was like, it wasn't just doing things to fix it and to have trust. It's like, I chose trust again and again. I chose trust. I cultivated trust, but it all came from trust within myself, because I truly believe the only way that we can feel safe in this world is when we're safe with self first, trusting in self, trusting in what we know, trusting in what we experience, trusting in our own divine sacred wisdom.
Yes. And also trusting that there is no continuous locked in situation. Like you trust where you are now. And you also trust, because you trust yourself, if something changes tomorrow, you trust yourself that you'll find your way back or you'll figure
Absolutely.
it out. And being able to, again, the curiosity and the trust it's just a constant. Yes. I love that. This ability to build that resilience is, I feel like, is like the greatest gift you can give yourself. Yeah. Oh my God. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you. This conversation has been so incredible in so many ways. I'm so happy that we got to dive in here and to answer like where to find me. Eventually my book, but right now my podcast is also where I love because it's a place where
My
I'm the
favorite
most
place.
expressed. So that's the Jacqueline Shaw Show. I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, but the Jacqueline Shaw Show is really where I get to dive deep with people. And I have so many different types of offerings. I have mastermind mentorship and courses and an activation album, but truly where my like heart lies for anyone who's wanting to drop into this type of work of seeing beyond these illusions of control and need and forcing and getting out of our head and letting your soul lead, I would say is a course that I have that's called the Ascension Pathway, which is really about tapping in and tuning into the truth within you and connecting to that divine wisdom within and the God within and shutting out all the outside noise.
I love you and your work. And everyone that's listening, please run to her podcast. It's like my daily ritual, truly. And I also want to say, if you ever were willing to come back, I didn't get to half of my questions because I feel like they just kept coming, but thank you so much. And I can't wait to have our next conversation.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to. This has been so fabulous. So yes, I will happily come back.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, friends, what'd you think? I really hope you enjoyed listening and got value from this episode of Your Well Life. If you did, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review so we can spread the word to more mamas who can benefit from this content. It's truly my deepest mission to help as many mamas out there feel empowered, aligned, and in flow in their bodies and lives through this podcast. And even just sharing with one friend who you think can benefit helps. Want more from me? Well, then don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you can get notified each time a new episode drops. Oh, and make sure to get on my newsletter list where I send out weekly emails to support, nourish, and inspire you. And follow me on Instagram where I'm the most active and share behind the scenes of my day-to-day life and insights I have along the way. I'm at Misha Vayner. I'm truly so grateful that you chose to spend your time with me and really hope to have you join along next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.